talk about some curveballs. If you can't tell by my voice, I'm still recovering from this stupid cold situation. I'm a little congested. I was supposed to record this episode a few days ago, and transparently, I just didn't have it in me. But it's time to get shit done. I have an awesome episode for you today. I've had some time to get a little bit better, despite how I sound right now. And we're going to hang out in some sweats, and we're going to talk about probably one of my favorite topics. And this is a recent thing that I've realized that I have found to be kind of a productivity hack. It's something when I coach my clients and I talk to business owners, I realize a lot of people get overwhelmed with this. And simply, if I were to summarize this idea, it's this. It's that the deciding also needs doing in business. What the heck do I mean? How does this apply to you? We're going to dive into all of that in just a sec, but I just want to start with a story. So recently, one of my clients who had multiple locations in her business was faced with a situation where they basically had to pro-con. Did it make sense to keep the multiple locations, or does it make more sense to maybe merge them and do something a little bit different with business? And we went back and forth for weeks talking through it. And we eventually came to a conclusion. We came to a decision together. And it was interesting because once that decision was made, it was like all of the action steps all of a sudden made so much sense, and we're very clear on what to do and why. And I think it's because we don't realize as business owners, a lot of what we also do is we make decisions. And here's the deal. Nobody is going to tell you what to do. There's lots of different ways to run business and make adjustments in your company. But at the end of the day, you as the boss have to be the one to decide. And I have found that breaking this up into kind of a process makes it a lot easier and takes the overwhelm out of deciding. Sorry, because the truth is, the more you grow, the more decisions you have to make, and the bigger they are. And sometimes that means saying no to things. And sometimes that means being radically honest about a season of business or life that you're currently in and saying, yes, I got to just muster through because this gets me to my long-term goals. And so I thought it would be helpful to talk through this today. I think this is something a lot of business owners don't even realize they're doing or not doing in business. And I would argue if you can figure out how to decide and do, and you separate those out into different things, and you have a solid strategy of how to do that, I would imagine the amount of peace and confidence you have in what steps to take in business would just get crystal clear. And it would be really cool to hear and see where you can go in business. So we're going to talk more about this. What is the difference between deciding and doing? In Kelsey speak, I kind of defined it as this. The deciding is choosing what action you're going to take. It's saying, yes, we're going to keep those separate locations, or you know what? No, we're going to merge them together. It's saying, you know what? Even though I have multiple clients who have this offer with me, I'm actually going to stop selling that and start selling this other thing. It's saying, you know, even though I've had this employee and 3 out of 5 things are awesome, the 2 things that are not awesome about them are big enough to where we're going to decide not to move forward with that employee. That is the deciding. It's that moment mentally where you're like, yep, and I'm doing this. And then the doing is my favorite part. It's the taking action. So I want to give a good example of this because I think that can be really helpful when you're thinking about this in just life, right? If you don't separate out the deciding and the doing into separate things, it would be as if you were hungry, your kitchen was empty, and you went to the grocery store without a grocery list. It's doable. You can probably have like a pretty gut feel of what you're out of, what you need, the basics, but I bet you would miss some things. I would also argue it probably wouldn't be your most efficient endeavor, right? Like I'm sure it would take a little bit longer to walk the aisles. Oh yeah, I do need that. And now you're going back to other areas. I would argue you probably buy things you don't need, or you buy things you already have that you forgot that you have. So we don't want you wandering through the grocery store without a game plan. We especially don't want you wandering through business without a game plan either. And that's what I'm talking about today. And I think the missing link, the most important part of business is that decision-making side. Because as I said earlier, no one's going to tell you what to do. People can give advice. You can listen to people like me, and I might say something. And then you listen to another coach who may say something completely different. And the truth is, we're both right. At the end of the day, you have to be the one to decide what is best for you. And if we untangle the deciding and the doing into two separate actions, it makes it a lot more feasible. So I have a couple examples of how this problem could come up in business, because I think it's helpful to understand that, right? In business, a great example that comes to mind is content creation. Imagine if I sat here right now and I'm like, okay, I need to record a podcast. What should I talk about? What should I wear? What should be the flow of the episode? Okay, now I got to get my light set up. Okay, now I got to get my microphone plugged in. Okay, now I got to make sure my phone is working. All of those things, that's so many different steps. You guys know this. I map out my episodes in advance. So when I go and sit and record, those are two different steps that happen in my brain. And it's a lot easier to be in record mode than it is to be in designing mode and then record mode. Those are different, right? So I make decisions on what I'm going to say and why and how in a different headspace than I am when I need to sit and produce. Though I'm going to be real with you. This curveball this week changed it. I had a different episode planned for this coming week. When you hear this episode, I had a different topic planned, but this felt so relevant right now. And especially as I'm getting back into the swing, as I'm healing my body and getting over this sickness, it's so top of mind right now how important it is to set yourself up for success in the deciding and doing, and how that needs to be separate in your business. And it's just going to make your life so much easier. And I have some hot tips at the end, so definitely stick around for those, because some of those might be a little bit of a hot take, but we'll come back to them in a sec. So content creation, the podcast example I just gave, but maybe you're listening and you're like, well, I don't have a podcast, so that doesn't apply to me. Well, let's look at Instagram. Imagine if you did the deciding and doing simultaneously, which means you are pulling up your phone. You're like, okay, shoot, Kelsey's right. I need to make a reel today. You're swiping and trying to find trending audio. You're deciding what should I film for this reel. You're deciding what am I going to say on top of the audio for this reel. You're typing the caption and then you're posting it. That's a lot. That's a big barrier to entry. That's a lot of reasons why, if you're good at negotiating with yourself, you say, I'm just not going to do it. So I would argue by not separating out the deciding and the doing, sometimes what can happen is avoidance. Sometimes you don't do anything. Sometimes you're so frozen because you need to make decisions and you also need to get it done that it's so overwhelming that you just freeze. Sometimes if you don't separate out the deciding and the doing, you make the wrong decision because you're so desperate to take action that you start taking action without even pausing and realizing, is this what I should be doing? And this is something I speak to all the time because it's so important and so many people get it wrong. You need to decide what's best for you. And you need to be confident that that is getting you long-term where you want to head. And especially in business, I noticed this so much in the beginning because there's so many distractions. But this is a secret killer as businesses are growing, because more money coming in, more team members, more offers, more responsibilities. Guess what? That means more decisions. And if you're avoiding them, your business is eventually going to stop moving forward. So content creation, that was a huge tangent, but content creation I think is a great example of this, right? When we're like, oh, I need to post something. What do I post? Imagine, if you will, if you're trying to get in the habit of posting more consistently on social media, for instance. What if you just spent a whole day mapping out what you're going to say and why? And then that was enough. And then you came back and you recorded and you batched or you filmed or you edited content at a different time. That's going to set you up for success. That's going to keep you focused. What if we even zoom out a little further? What if before you decide, you just gather information and you start looking at trending audio and you start looking at what your target audience is responding to, and you gather all these ideas together and you just spend an hour on the platform just deciding, here's the things that I think are relevant to what I'm going to do. And then you take all of that information you just gathered and now you put on the hat of deciding, and you're like, okay, of these 20 things I saved and I liked and I felt like were relevant for me, I'm going to take 10 of them. And then you decide that that's what you're taking action on. And then another day you take action. I think when we put some process behind this stuff, it allows us to be more efficient and tactical. And guess what? That means we're moving the needle forward in our business in a productive way that we decided. I say something a lot with my clients that there's this concept that business kind of happens to you. I would argue if you're listening to this and you are newer in business, maybe you're year 1, 2, maybe even 3, and you're still kind of just getting your teeth wet. You're still getting used to it, right? There's a certain point in the beginning where you do all the things. And we're all going to mess up. Like, this podcast is not here to catch you and say, you're never going to mess up. The best teacher is a mess up. Like, that's the best lessons I've ever learned is from my own mistakes, right? But that being said, you get to a point where like things just kind of happen to you. And then you take a pit stop and you realize, oh, I could continue to let my business just kind of happen to me, or I can pause. I can make some decisions that are aligned for me for where I want to go. And then I start taking decisive action in those directions. And that's the part where that shift that has to happen, I think, is so key. And so many people miss it. And here's what it looks like as a broad business issue if you don't do it. It looks like the person who blinks and they're like, I'm just kind of in this. Like, I started this for fun and out of passion, and, you know, I have some good clientele, and, well, here I am. Like, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Or, you know, I make okay money. I'm doing all right. But, you know, my partner handles the bills and takes care of us. And this is just kind of like my hobby I get paid for. The people who dream big and want to do big things are decisive. And sometimes that means they're going to make decisions that other people don't agree with. But they're decisive, and that's important. And guess what? The faster you make decisions and take action, if it's the wrong decision, the faster you're able to pick yourself up and make adjustments as you need to. So that is why I think this is so crucial and important in business. If you're listening, I think anyone listening, there's probably some decisions on the table that you need to make. And I'm going to talk more about 3 specific tips that I think are going to help you through this process. I know they've helped me. I know literally, like I said, this week was a curveball for me. I've been not feeling 100% for a full week now. And it's really gotten to a point where I had to be honest about what I was able to get done in my business personally. I'm authentic. You guys know me. And I had to make some decisions, like last Friday when I had to clear out my entire day, which was full of meetings and things I was very excited for. I had to make the decision to say, I can't do it today. I can't give these people my best. And the best thing I can do right now is take care of myself. And just deciding instead of putting off the decision making. There were multiple, I want to say I had, I don't know, 6 meetings on that Friday, which is not a normal Friday for me, but just how the cards fell that week. When I woke up that morning, instead of just putting off decision making, imagine if I'm going to try for that next hour. Oh, okay, I'm not feeling great. Okay, that next hour. I woke up, I went to the bathroom and I go, yeah, I can't do it today. And I immediately decided. Then I was able to reach out to my assistant who was able to take action, reschedule all these people. And guess what? Everyone's fine. Everything turned out just fine. So being able to make those quick decisions in the moment are so important. And it comes from the clarity and confidence of you knowing where you're headed and why in your business. And then the action just follows. So 3 hot tips. I told you, we're going to get hot here. 3 hot tips that I think help in this deciding needs doing chapter of life that we're all in right now. All of us have different variations of this that are showing up. So number 1 is this. I love this. One of my clients, they have a team of over 50 employees. So pretty small business, but still bigger small business. They have a D-Day, a decision day. I think it's every other week where the leadership comes together and they make decisions. And I think that's so smart. So hot tip number 1 is this. If you're listening, what if you carved out some time where all you did was make decisions? And what if that was enough for that day? I think it's so important to set us up for success. Part of that comes from being really aware of yourself, knowing how you operate, knowing when you're at your best, knowing when you need to make adjustments, just like me recording this episode, not on a Wednesday. Normally I do them on Wednesdays, but I had to make quick decisions. And it also meant being radically honest about today. Like, okay, I do need to sit down and record this episode. No excuses. And even though I sound a little phlegmy, and truthfully, I'm wearing sweatpants and some Minnie Mouse slippers right now that you can't see, I'm here to deliver because I am so committed to this podcast and to serving you that I was a non-negotiable. Making the decision was easy. Taking action was easy because I set myself up for success. Even though this week, this day, this moment is an outlier in how I normally run my business, I'm able to reprioritize and take action quickly because it's that important to my long-term goals in my business. So point one, carve out time where you just make decisions. Maybe that is part of your weekly CEO day. That's something I talk about very often. Or maybe your month when you do your audit. Maybe any quote unquote big decisions you make. For me, I'm pretty honest with myself, or at least I try to be. I have an offer that I know I want to launch at some point this year, probably summer. I'm like, it's there. People are asking for it. I'm excited about it. Like, I'm chomping at the bit, but I know now is not the time. And with that new offer comes a lot of decisions I need to make. How long is this offer? Who's it for? What's the price? All those things. Those are all decisions I, Kelsey, have to make. I haven't even carved out time to make decisions yet because I know there's other priorities that are bigger for me currently. And I'm honest with myself about that. But when it comes time to take action on this new thing, I'm going to carve out a day where I just decide. I just sit in it. Maybe I go to an Airbnb by myself and I just sit and I make decisions. Like I look forward to that. And I think in a world where we're all obsessed with to-do lists and productivity and getting shit done, what if you just decided for a day and that was enough? Okay, hot tip number 2, ask yourself if this decision aligns with your long-term goals / the vision of where you want to go. And this is the part earlier where I said, if you don't decide before doing, sometimes you start doing the wrong stuff. I know I have fallen guilty to this. I know clients have, just other business friends I talk to have. Be clear about where you're headed and why. And if you are listening to this and you've already achieved some goals that you have set for yourself, pause here and recalibrate. Set new ones. And make sure they're a mixture of things that you can see, feel, touch, things that you can measure, things that you know, oh, I got there. Because here's the deal. When you say things like, I just want to be successful, how do you ever know if you got there? And how do you make adjustments if you're off base or you're super close but not quite there? What does success mean? How do you measure that? How are you clear on what that end destination looks like for you and your business? So point number 2, hot tip number 2, is ensure the decisions you're making align with your goals and visions. I have everybody do some level of goal setting, whether they're, excuse me, one-on-one clients. We do goal setting in my networking group I run. I encourage goal setting in Get Shit Done Club because I think it's so important to know where we're headed and why. And on top of that, I always say there's no one way to do business. Like, you can do anything. I could sit here if I wanted to. I could just say, you know what? I'm just going to turn this podcast into my business. I shut everything else down. If I wanted to, if that was my long-term goal, I could find a way to make that happen. There are people who have done it. I'm not some like magical person who's reinventing the wheel or creating something brand new. There's no one way to do business. And the only way I know where I'm headed is when I sit and I decide. So if you haven't done that for yourself, and especially I would argue if you are in a season where you are firefighting, and that is something that's come up quite a bit with my clients, if you are just in pure survival mode, you have big issues, problems, things right in front of you, and you haven't thought beyond just surviving that thing, I would argue you need this goal setting more than anyone else. And I'm also going to add a caveat. If you're listening to this and you are newer in business and you have no money, no clients coming in the door, but you've spent a lot of time goal setting, I would argue your problem's the opposite. I think there's seasons for this, seasons where we do need to get clear on where we're headed and why, and seasons where the doing will help us affirm if where we're headed and why makes sense. If I were to sit and build my business of what I thought it would be 3 years out and in Sharpie, commit to it, tattoo it on my body, like commit to it, I would have been so off. When I first got into the coaching space, there was a lot of assumptions and a lot of things I did that I thought I was going to do more and more of. I thought I was going to have a bunch of courses, which is hilarious now because, you know, I hate courses. I totally misread the room, but I had a general idea of where I was headed and I knew how I wanted to make people feel. And then I took action. I took messy action and things worked and things didn't work. And I paid for things that I shouldn't have. And I made good money and then I spent money and I hired people too early and I hired the wrong people and I made a lot of mistakes. But I kept revisiting those goals and that vision and recalibrating as I had more data and experience to back it up. So hot tip number 2, get really clear on where you're headed and why. Don't get hung up on it, but get clear on it and make sure you understand. And if you have a team of people, make sure they understand too. Then hot tip number 3 is this. If you are feeling overwhelmed, if you're listening to this and you have like a bead of sweat dripping down your forehead that's not from being sick, odds are you probably have some decisions to make. And I can't tell you how much peace comes from making decisions. And sometimes they're hard. I shared a couple episodes about this trip I did in October 2023, if you're listening in real time, where I kept saying this thing about how I felt bad. I was postponing some decisions in business because I felt bad about this person, that person, this situation, these people. I was worried about letting other people down, being inconvenient. And it was costing me my long-term goals and vision and my sanity and my peace. And when I came back and I had some very difficult conversations with people, it's like the clouds opened up. My business opened up. Things have been nothing but positive since then. They haven't been easy. There's moments that have been difficult, but just making the decision gave me peace. And it's like I was putting that off so hard when the biggest issue in my business at that time, that specific moment, was I wasn't making decisions. And it costs me a lot of time, money, heartache, stress. So I encourage you, if you're listening to this and you're feeling that overwhelm, odds are you probably have some decisions to make. And they can be simple things like, you know what? I really hate my email marketing system. Every time I log in, I'm just annoyed. Every time I go to write a newsletter, I can't find where the templates went. Maybe you need to make a decision on, do you keep that platform or not? Maybe it's personnel. Maybe it's, do you keep that employee or not? Maybe it's a client. I have helped my clients fire clients. And if they're adding stress, if they are not your dream person and you're at a place where it's just not working, like what if you just owned that and you got in front of that? So give yourself the permission to decide. And maybe you just need a day where you just do that. That's all. That's all I have to say. Those are the 3 hot tips I have for you. And I just want you to know that the deciding is enough. Like your business probably has some deciding to happen within it. Just let that be enough. And then take action another day. And then make a to-do list tomorrow. You can make the to-do list tomorrow, right? So I encourage you to make some decisions. And as you're listening to this episode, I would love to hear about them. I have this online community. It's called the Get Shit Done Club. It's free. And it's this cool place where business owners are in a space of taking action, messy action. There's people in there who are just getting started. There's people who are 10 plus years in industry with multiple team members and location, but everyone is taking some sort of action towards their goals. And I would love to have you in there. You can find us online at Get Shit Done Club on Facebook or in the show notes. If you're lazy like me, just click on the show notes. You can click on the link. It'll get you right in there. But I would love to hear inside that community what big decisions you're making, because you're not alone. There's no one way to do business. There's just finding your way. And although I love getting shit done, I love taking action, this deciding piece is pretty important. That's why there's an entire episode about it now. I encourage you to just decide, make some decisions, share, have some accountability. Like I said, join our group if that sounds like a good fit for you. We'd love to have you in there. And that's all I have for you this week. I'll catch you on the next one.